In America, there is a statistical correlation between church attendance and Republican voters. I have a hypothesis that actually makes sense of this, but first I want to talk about why it doesn't make sense, why I felt the need to formulate a hypothesis. Republicans are generally against social welfare programs for the sick and the poor. In other words, they are not in favor of helping the least among us. Republicans are the ones always crowing about their gun rights. But who are they planning to shoot? If they're Christian, we know it can't be their enemies. Well, Dick Cheney shot his friend in the face a couple years ago. Maybe you're supposed to shoot your friends and love your enemies. Republicans have been advocates for the rich, even though the Christian Savior clearly had contempt for the rich and the greedy. Republicans seem to be the biggest advocates for today's military spending, even though Jesus supposedly said, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Republicans are the least likely to take a pro-liberty stance on gay rights or victimless crimes, even though their God supposedly gave us free will, including the free will to sin against him. None of these traditional Republican values combine well with the brand of Christianity I hear described by most Christians. So why this lack of compassion? Why do Christian voters tend to side with the party that favors an aggressive foreign policy and material wealth? Where did these values come from, if not from Jesus? Here is my hypothesis. I think they came from God. I don't mean they were given to us by a God. I mean that they came from the idea of a God. Pat Robertson illustrated this point very well with his recent comments about the Haitian earthquake. When your worldview includes an all-powerful, all-knowing entity who has a plan, all bets are off. Jesus can talk until he's blue in the face about love and compassion, but he is no match for the fundamental presumption that all things happen for a reason. Not only that, but that reason was deliberated over by an all-loving entity who knows best. With that mindset, how was Pat Robertson meant to analyze recent events and come to any other conclusion? It seems to me that most religious mindsets are predicated on the idea that nature is perfect. The default position is perfection. If things do go wrong for someone, it's because they must have been conspiring against nature's perfect plan. So people are always to blame with this mentality. When people suffer, it can never be because of circumstance or misfortune. It always has to be their fault somehow. They must have betrayed nature's plan. They must have signed a pact with the devil. Otherwise, things would have gone their way. This toxic way of thinking is to blame for Pat Robertson's nauseating lack of compassion. And I'm guessing it is the culprit for the statistic I used earlier about church-going Republicans. In my opinion, nature's default is far from perfect, and I see human intervention with nature exactly the opposite way. When things go right, it's usually because of human intervention. Nature's default is that humans live an average of 30 years, usually suffering an agonizing death. We don't anymore. Infant mortality has steadily declined over the last 50 years, and probably has done so over the last 50,000. This isn't because nature had a plan, it's because we did. I've done videos before about how we owe many of our modern comforts to human understanding, and through that understanding to our manipulation of nature. So I won't go into that in this video. But sometimes bad things do happen to good people in this world, and once you recognize that fact, you can realize that it is up to us to pick up the pieces when nature throws a temper tantrum. It's true enough to say that nature is all-powerful, but it certainly hasn't shown itself to be all-knowing or all-loving. As far as I can tell, knowing and loving is human territory. And if you think what I'm saying about manipulation of nature for our own ends means that I'm playing God, well, to that I say, someone has to.